We're now going to look at how a triple integral can be used to calculate what we call a hypervolume of some four-dimensional function that has a three-dimensional domain region. So we're going to take a look at this domain region here in 3D, and every single ordered triple within this domain region is an ordered triple that can be plugged into the function to map to a range element that is in that fourth dimension. So what we're looking at here is the domain region. Let's consider the length of this rectangular solid to be measured from the x value a to the x value b, this width back here measured from c to d, and the height measured from r to s. Now divide a to b into n subintervals, where each one of them is going to be called delta x wide, and the width of each subinterval will be b minus a divided by the number of subintervals that we use. If we divide the regions C to D into M subintervals, each one is going to be delta y wide, or a small change in y, and each of those subintervals is D minus C divided by M wide. If we divide the region R to S into L subintervals, each of those subintervals is going to be a small change in Z, where the width is S minus R divided by L. So we can look at the ith subinterval in the direction of x, which is delta x wide, the jth subinterval in the direction of y, which is delta y wide, and the kth subinterval in the direction of z, and we'll call this delta z wide. Now, when we fly all of those sections out into that domain region, we get what we'll call the Bij block in here. And now let's consider the volume of that little tiny box. And we'll call that volume a delta V, which is the volume of the Bij box, which can be then calculated by looking at the length times the width times that height. Now let's recall in R2 we used Riemann sums to approximate the area underneath the curve. In order to do that, we looked at the ith subinterval, and the width of that subinterval was delta x, and to get the height of that rectangle we looked at a domain element and the range element that it mapped to. So the area of an approximating rectangle was the height, f at x sub I, times the width, delta x, and then we added up infinitely many of these to get the area under the curve. And this is the Riemann sum that was used in that process. The Riemann sum in 3 dimensions was calculated in a similar way. We had a 2-dimensional domain region, but this time we looked at the Rij rectangle within that 2D domain. We found a domain representative, x sub I, y sub j. We flew that up to the surface to get the volume of an approximating rectangular solid, where the height of that rectangle was determined by plugging our domain representative into the surface function, and the Riemann sum gave us an approximation for the volume between this surface and the domain region. And this Riemann sum was a double sum, the first as I goes from 1 to n, the second as j goes from 1 to m. To get the volume of this rectangular solid, we looked at the area of the base, which was delta x wide, delta y long, and then we multiplied that through by the height, which was determined by the function value. Now, in both of these scenarios, notice that we're multiplying a region in the domain by a range element. And that fact is going to help us when we try to create that Riemann sum in 4-dimensional space. In R3, we had that range element being a surface that we could actually graph. But in R4, our range is a 4D function that we're not able to graph. So we're just going to pull from the patterns that we've already seen. In R2, we created a single sum. In R3, we created a double sum. In R4, this is going to be a triple sum. The domain region that we're going to be multiplying by is going to be delta x, delta y, delta z, which is that quantity delta V, which can be interpreted as the tiny volume of that Bij box that we saw at the beginning. And we're going to multiply this by the range element, which is going to be our function evaluated at a domain representative within that little tiny volume box. We'll call it x sub I, y sub j, and z sub k. We'll say that I goes from 1 to n, j goes from 1 to m, and k is going to be going from 1 to L. And what this triple sum is going to give us is something that we call a hypervolume. And adding up all these tiny hypervolumes gives us an approximation for the total hypervolume over the entire 4D function. We can get the exact hypervolume by taking the limit of this as n, m, and l all go to infinity. And once we take that limit, we see that we're going to end up with a triple integral where we're integrating with respect to x, with respect to y, and with respect to z. So let's consider an arbitrary four-dimensional function, f at x, y, z, that has this 3D domain that we've drawn here. And when we calculate these triple integrals, we'll need to figure out our limits of integration. So let's consider this 3D domain region to be bounded by a surface on the top. Z2 is equal to some surface function, we'll call it F2. And the floor can also be represented by a surface, we'll call it Z1, some other function of x and y. And somewhere inside this domain region, we'll think about floating a little bitty tiny rectangular solid. And if we were to float this rectangular solid up and down, we see that we're going to end up hitting the same floor and ceiling functions no matter where we are in the interval. This would be integrating with respect to z first, and when calculating that hypervolume, which is a triple integral, where we're looking at the volume of that little bitty tiny box multiplied through by a range element to get that hypervolume. Again, in this scenario, we're looking at integrating with respect to z first, which would then leave the area of a box that remains. Remember that dv was length times width times height, but since we haven't decided on the order of these remaining iterations, we'll just call that dA and decide on that in a minute. But right now, we're focusing on our dz limits, and when our floating box is at its lowest extreme value, the lower limit for z is going to be this function f1. Now, since we're integrating with respect to z, it's okay to have x and y values in the limit. And when our box is floating to its upper extreme value, the upper limit is going to be the second surface function, and this is going to then be our inside iteration. Now, to determine the order of dx dy or dy dx, the second two iterations, what we're going to do is project this 3D domain region into the plane of the other two variables, the ones that we did not integrate with respect to in the first iteration. And in this case, that's x and y. And when we project this 3D domain region into the xy plane, we would be looking then at this two-dimensional space in the floor. Let's call it R. Let's also assume that this 2D region in the floor goes from A to B and from C to D. And I know my drawing is a little off here, but we'll just kind of go with it as a concept drawing. So now we're looking at the xy plane and that region in the floor. And with this nice rectangular region, we now think about a small rectangle within that region. And in this scenario, it doesn't matter if we now go with respect to y first and then with respect to x, or with respect to x first and then with respect to y. Let's go with respect to y first, which is going to make our second iteration with respect to y. When we float our box to the lowest extreme, we end up with a y value of c. When our box is at the highest extreme, we get the upper limit of d. And finally then, we'll integrate with respect to x, and the lowest limit on x is a, and the highest limit on x is b. And so when evaluating a triple integral and trying to figure out the limits of integration, we're going to look at a volume of a small box and determine the first variable of integration. After we do that, we project that 3D region into the plane of the remaining two variables, and then look into that plane to determine the order of integration for the remaining two. So when we're integrating with respect to z, it's okay to have x's and y's in the limits, because those are being held constant. When we integrate with respect to y, it's okay to have x in the limit because that's what's being held constant in that second iteration. And in the last iteration, the limits of integration need to be constants with respect to all of the variables.